All right, Isabel, thanks a lot for joining us here on Facebook Live on ABC 13. So as we get some viewers tuning in, we'll definitely maybe field some questions once we kind of go through some of the questions we want to ask you about on some different topics here concerning COVID-19.
Sure.
And for everybody that is tuning in, let's say this, we've got Isabel Valdez on phone here, or on Facebook Live, I should say, and she is the Baylor Internal Medicine Physician's Assistant as well. So thanks for joining us here on Facebook Live.
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here.
I mean, you know, we could start anywhere. There's so many different topics when you talk about COVID-19. One of the things from the different angles we've been covering today that came up as well is we know that it's quickly spreading in New Orleans and Louisiana in particular.
Yeah, I understand that that's happening now. I know there's a concern because we just had Mardi Gras maybe, 3 weeks ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously that's being attributed to the quick spread there because you had thousands and thousands, even if they weren't on Bourbon Street, which there were tens of thousands there probably, you still had people congregating in different parts of the state celebrating their own cities as well. So, you know, I know that several health professionals are attributing that kind of large party and gathering to the quick spread there as well. Is that what you're seeing as well?
That's definitely what we're going to see. I think it goes with the opposite, the complete opposite of social distancing, right? So that you're all together in such a small setting on Bourbon Street, or even if you're together with friends and family in New Orleans, and because it's such a large group, and this happened before. Mardi Gras was right before we really hit the ground running with coronavirus, but all that proximity, lots of people sharing drinks. So there's a lot of food sharing food, probably not adhering as diligently to the hand washing routine that we've been so good about promoting now. So basically everything that we have been promoting now didn't happen there. It's going to spread there. It's going to grow there. And because we're so close as geographically close, but it can come this way too.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. I mean, obviously, even dating back before Hurricane Katrina, these two cities have been close, Houston and New Orleans. I mean, Houstonians love to frequent Bourbon Street. It's an easy road trip to some degree for them, if not a quick flight. And then, of course, Hurricane Katrina happened, where we had lots of shelters open up, even the Astrodome here, to bring some of those evacuees in. And then, of course, what had developed as well is that some decided to stay here. Now they've got family back in Louisiana, back in New Orleans.
Right.
So the close ties there you were speaking to. Do you have any concerns at all? But you know, even though there is a shelter in place between these two states, that the ties here, the family ties, if you will, could play some sort of impact here in Houston, because it seems like we're relatively seeing low cases, albeit we're not doing the testing maybe like we should, but we still have low numbers.
Right. I think that it's going to be very difficult, culturally speaking, to separate the two cities because we're very culturally connected. And it's going to be difficult to keep families apart, be it friend families or families, blood families. So in that travel, in that in that connection, that there will be some I don't want to say contamination, but rather contraction, and it's going to happen asymptomatically. So out of the goodwill of our hearts, we're going to visit our families. We're going to maybe catch something while we're there, asymptomatically bring it here, or vice versa too. I mean, we could send something to a family that's there, but because the numbers are expected to be pretty large there, we're going to get an influx. And I don't want to be the one to suggest like, don't visit your families. It's hard for me to say that too, but at the same time, we have to stick to the social distancing, the shelter in place, the way our governments have.
Okay, all right. And again, if anyone's just joining us, we're on Facebook Live right here with Isabel Valdez, and she's with the Baylor Internal Medicine Physician's Assistant as well, giving us some advice here on different aspects of COVID-19. Again, we've got shelter in places in both states for the most part. Do you feel like maybe is it to the point where we don't want any contamination from cases coming in from Louisiana to Texas or Houston? Do you think any type of local leaders or even state leaders need to take any actions? I'm not saying shut down the border between the two states, but maybe monitor traffic. I'm not sure. I'm kind of throwing ideas out and looking at what your guidance here from a health perspective.
Well, from the public health perspective, I think the U.S. has even tried to do that with some extent between the border with our northern neighbors in Canada, and I know that didn't go so well, right? So I don't know if our leaders want to conduct a very quick study, talking to epidemiologists and getting their insight as to whether or not we should take some drastic measures in the interim. Just like we're doing shelter in place, maybe a suggestion of a shelter in state, limiting interstate travel, just like we're limiting, we're quarantining those family and friends of the Texans that are coming in from New York, or giving them that specific quarantine. So that's kind of a decision that our leaders have already enacted, and hopefully that would help. Because if you stay indoors for about 14 days from when you were in those cities, those 14 days, that's the window of incubation for COVID. So should you had been exposed to COVID, let's say Monday, you flew back on Monday and you're indoors for 14 days, you self-quarantine, you're less likely to pass it on to others. So self-quarantining is still a great idea. If our government leaders want to talk to epidemiologists about having some kind of shelter in state, that's a great question for them to consider, just because of the circumstances. And it would be short-lived. It wouldn't be long-lived.
Okay.
It's just something in the meantime.
All right. And here's some good stuff as well, Isabel. We're getting some questions from some of our Facebook Live viewers here at ABC 13 as well. Here's a great question. So this comes from a viewer. If you get the coronavirus, can you get it again after you recovered from it?
The concern is that we might still get it, and I want to apologize. I almost touched my face. Cardinal rule number one, don't touch your face. I almost touched my face.
On this one right here, Isabel, I think someone's asking, like, from a personal standpoint. They're saying, if I get coronavirus and I recover from it, can I get it again?
Yeah, you probably can if you'll actually, let me do two things to that point. One is that you'll get some immunity. So hopefully, if you do get it again, which is likely because we can be exposed again, and coronavirus, if it behaves like the flu virus, it will mutate, so it will change. So if the coronavirus, what we know about the flu virus, if the coronavirus behaves like the flu virus, it will mutate, it will change. You can get reinfected. And if you get reinfected, hopefully the immunity from the first infection you have will protect you so that you don't have as severe of an infection as before.
Okay, so if you recovered first one time, yes, you could get it again, but the good news is more than likely it will not be even remotely as tough if it was the first time at all. I know different hospitals can have different policies, but from your standpoint, being at Baylor Medicine, this mom is asking, can parents stay at the hospital with a special needs adult who is nonverbal?
I think I heard this morning that some hospitals are limiting the amount of visitors, and the visitors that are allowed are visitors that are going to help an adult with disabilities. I think Memorial Hermann was one of the first ones to announce it this morning. They're limiting friends and families from visiting. However, special circumstances, what I did hear was patients with disabilities, labor and delivery patients, pregnant women, for instance, children, of course. I think there's certain circumstances where they will let you, and just ask the hospital administration.
That is a great point, because there's rules coming up, but there's always exceptions to every rule. So if you have a question, ask your particular hospital, the person you're dealing with. Here's another good one. Does coronavirus carry in the wind? It's from another viewer of ours.
I got in trouble with this question. It's a droplet virus, so it's pretty heavy in the droplets, so it's not going to be aerosolized for too long. However, it will, for the milliseconds that it's in the air, if you happen to be in that wind space of the airspace where that is aerosolized for those milliseconds, you're running with your mouth open, you are breathing in real heavily from your nose because you went for a run, it will get into your respiratory tracts by way of your nose or your mouth. So it can happen. Okay,
it almost sounds like, think of like a sneeze. A sneeze is not going to go 20 yards. But if someone was to sneeze on you, it's going to go 3 feet maybe, and that's as long as it would carry in the wind. After that, okay.
Yeah, and just real quick, it drops into the surfaces. So once it drops on surfaces, it's going to live there for a lot longer than those few minutes. It's going to live on the surfaces for 2 hours, 3 hours. So that's what goes to the point of cleaning the surfaces as often as you can.
Okay. Another one right here. If a small child gets COVID, is a parent allowed to stay with that child? I think that we kind of answered that already. Ask the hospital. I know we've reported here at ABC 13 that a guardian or a parent is allowed to be at the hospital with a minor. So we've got that one already. And I know this one's kind of all over the place, but any word on antibody tests and where they are at this point? Would you possibly know?
I wouldn't know. I have to defer to my team at Baylor, my coworkers who are doing virology, like Dr. Maria Botassi and Dr. Peter Hotez. They might be the experts on that one, but I don't know about antibody tests right now.
Okay. All right. Another thing I also wanted to ask you about is, kind of comparing COVID-19 to the influenza that we deal with every year, because the season runs its course. It could vary here in Texas, but it'll go from, even in the U.S., from early October through March, pretty much every single year. Some of the numbers off of hopkinsmedicine.org is that when we look at infections, approximately worldwide, COVID-19 infections, this was as of this morning, there was roughly about 543,000 cases worldwide. When we talk about the flu worldwide, annually, there's 1 billion cases worldwide. And so obviously there's a huge discrepancy between cases of COVID-19 and the flu every year. So, I mean, obviously we've seen video out of Spain, out of Italy, and even maybe some degree to New York as well, where things look drastic. Why is flu way more prevalent and even seems more serious when we talk about the deaths as well versus COVID-19? COVID-19, I'm saying, is more serious in our eyes right now than the flu is annually, and we deal with it every year.
I think it's because it's a novel virus, right? So how is it that the new guy is getting all the attention right now compared to the one that's been here forever, in that case being the flu? Well, because our bodies don't recognize at all the virus. None of us have ever had the immunity to it, unless you have had the infection and you're on the other end of the infection where you've recovered. So the fact that we don't have immunity as a population and worldwide, we are becoming a lot more susceptible to this infection. And because there's absolutely no way to treat it, I know we've got some great treatments for the flu, prevention being number one, the flu shot. We don't have a way to vaccinate yet against the coronavirus. So whereas a patient might get the flu infection, because our bodies know some of the influenza virus, they're able to mount a response, and especially if you had the vaccine. But with COVID, nobody has immunity, and it's wreaking havoc on everybody, even healthy patients, especially so though our vulnerable population. So that's why we're seeing the pictures we're seeing, because there's absolutely no one out there that can have immunity. Okay. And it creates a domino effect, because now one person gets sick and they pass it to 2 or 3, and then those 3 and further. So it's just quickly growing.
And would you know, I mean, is there any idea possibly that the COVID-19 virus was here maybe before we even knew, because we saw it kind of break out in December in China? And some people would say, hey, in December and January here, in even the Houston area, there was a lot of illnesses going on. So some people are maybe going, was it already here? Maybe we already kind of went through it, but now we're just finding out, and now we're trying to ramp up efforts?
I think so. I mean, I hate to say this, because hindsight is 20/20, right? But there's some cases that we've probably saw nationwide that, you have the flu, everything about you looks like the flu, but you tested negative for the flu, and we're going to treat you, but you're getting pretty sick from your flu, which is really different. So it just behaves so much like the flu. We treat it like the flu because that's what we thought we were seeing domestically, but we didn't have the capacity to test then. We still don't have the full capacity to test now. We're ramping up efforts. I have to give it to our leaders, our judge, our city, our mayor, everybody, even our representatives are trying to get us more of those testing kits from FEMA. I think that the more we test, the more we'll realize just how widespread it is. And there was actually some epidemiologists and some researchers that said, if we could actually just test everyone in the nation just so we know who's positive, we would really shed light on how many people really have it, and it would actually help the purposes of quarantine the ones we knew had the positive infection, so that the ones that are negative can keep the economy in the world going. But because we don't have enough tests, we can't do that.
Yeah, is it also possible that maybe somebody's even gotten COVID-19, already gone through it, and probably didn't even know they had it?
I would say so, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. And in fact, I'm even seeing that cases right now where my patients, I actually had a patient on the phone today and it said, you tested negative on COVID, your body's behaving too much like COVID, I'm just going to follow COVID precautions with you and self-quarantine, take your inhalers and whatnot to stay at home, because I don't want to risk that this patient might actually have a COVID, a false negative, and then keep spreading the infection to others.
Okay. All right. And in closing here, I want to ask you 2 more questions that came in from our viewers as well.
Sure.
So does soap work on COVID-19, even if it doesn't say antibacterial?
I love this question. I've been asked this before. Yes, it will, because it's not so much that the COVID has the outer component of the COVID is like a fatty layer, and soap will penetrate that fatty layer of the virus and will break it apart. So you don't need antibacterial soap, and also antibacterial stuff and virus, and we're talking about COVID-19 virus, so they're different germs, but because the virus is made out of a fatty layer, soap will penetrate it. You are good. 20 seconds, don't forget.
We'll sing that happy birthday song, right? We've all heard that by now. Okay, you kind of answered this one already, but just for our viewer, if they're still watching, because we talked about surfaces, what about bringing it home on our shoes or clothes? Should people be concerned?
I actually have been recommending to patients to have those precautions too, because some studies have suggested that the virus can last on different material for days, and I'm quoting one study, so please, we don't make decisions based on one study, but one study I heard about, it could live on fabric for 9 days, so that's a long time. So what I've been telling patients is have a clean set of clothing in the garage or in the first room of the house, so that you can change into it right away. Have your hamper there on the side and just toss everything and dump it in the wash. I saw something on Facebook about Lysoling your shoes. It might not be the best shine and it might affect the material, but it's not a bad idea. Or keep the shoes outside for 24 hours so that they can get disinfected. Okay. The same thing goes to things that you bring in from the pharmacy and from the grocery store. Wipe things down.
Okay. How do you know the difference between allergies and virus, COVID-19?
Right. The big one that I look for is fevers. Fevers break the rules. Any fever over 100.5. So this is my push for getting a thermometer, because the hand is not a thermometer. So grab a thermometer, get the one you have, change the batteries if you need to, and start using it, so that if you get a temperature over 100.5, 101 temperature, your doctor's not going to ignore those numbers. We're not going to ignore something like that. So check your temperature. That's the biggest one to look for.
Because of allergies, you really won't have a fever. So that's why there's a difference right there. Okay, great point right there. How about this? If you test positive, what happens after 14 days? Are you tested again?
That's a great question, because of the CDC. At first, the CDC was recommending that patients who tested positive had to have 2 negative tests repeated 24 hours apart. However, because there's so few tests, the CDC came out with a different recommendation. So now, if you tested positive for the infection and you cannot get the test again, you are given, the CDC recommends you have at least 3 full days of no fevers, and that means no fevers without the assistance of medication, and also 3 full days of improvement of your symptoms. That means your shortness of breath and your cough are getting better on their own.
Okay, last one here. Can you test positive but never get sick, never show the symptoms?
You could. There's a concern with the asymptomatic carriers. Yes, there is that. So you could be a carrier. You could test positive. More often than not, it could be that you just have rock star immunity, and lucky you. But eventually, the virus will rear its ugly face and give you some symptoms eventually.
We will pray for rock star immunity. I love that term right there. Isabel Valdez here, Baylor Internal Medicine Physician's Assistant here. Thanks a lot for answering questions for us and our viewers as well. We appreciate the work you're doing on the front line as well. So thank you very much.
Happy to be here, and wash your hands, everybody.
You got it. Take care, Isabel.
All right, bye.
Bye.